Now, with the Addis Ababa Accord, one feels that in Africa and in the world we have got, or we have created, a different nation, one nation very strong, is called the Sudan. So now we feel that all the countries in the world, or the African countries, they respect the Sudan, because people at last, after 17 years, became wiser, and they solved their own problem, and being stronger by reaching this agreement.
Sudan's Minister of the Interior, Major General Mohammed al-Bashir Ahmed, commenting on the ceasefire agreement that ended the civil war in South Sudan.
We think that now, after this agreement, we can link the whole Africa, north of the desert or south of the desert. We have got this bridge which is called the Sudan, with the different composition, of the nation and so on. So indeed it is a great achievement.
The agreement was signed in Addis Ababa earlier this year. Under its terms, the central government agreed to establish an autonomous region in South Sudan in return for a rebel promise to abandon their fight for complete secession. If the agreement proves permanent, and that's by no means certain yet, it'll mean that these people, the Negroes of South Sudan, will have won much of what they've been struggling for the last 17 years, a large measure of self-government that will free them from what they claim to be domination and exploitation by Sudan's Arab majority. Sudan is Africa's biggest country, nearly 1 million square miles, but its population numbers only 16 millions, two-thirds of whom are Arabs living in the north around the capital, Khartoum. In the south, around Juba, live 5 million Negroes, from whom the إنيانيا rebels draw their support. Juba, the new regional capital of the south, is already feeling the practical effects of the ceasefire. Thousands of people have flocked into the town from the surrounding bush. The local hospital, one of the few medical centers in the south that have survived the ravages of the war, has been swamped by people demanding treatment. It now has to deal with all kinds of diseases, from malnutrition to leprosy, all of which have increased dramatically during the long period of unrest. Some of these people have walked over 100 miles to get treatment. Those who can't get a bed just sleep on the floor outside, waiting their turn. At least 500,000 people have died in the war, most of them from starvation or disease. The number killed in actual combat is probably quite small. But some of the fighting has been fierce, and in country areas where the rebels carried out guerrilla raids on government troops, many villages bear the scars of the conflict. This was Loka, once an educational center of some importance in the south. Today, weeds grow among the ruins. There are about 30,000 إنيانيا rebels still in the bush. Cautiously, they're emerging in small groups to see if peace really has arrived. This group had been operating near the Uganda border. Significantly, one of them wore the cap and jacket of an Israeli paracommando. Despite the ceasefire, they were skeptical about Khartoum's sincerity.
We would not believe until it is implemented, of course.
Yeah.
Our belief will just be
it comes out from the implementation. And if everything is not implemented according to our desire,
for sure we are at our stronghold. In fact, we can't mind of anything, provided that it is implemented.
And you're keeping your weapons for the time being?
Yes. We are still keeping our weapons just today.
I see.
Yes.
You're not giving them up until you're absolutely certain that everything is fine?
Yes, according to the agreement which was set, so that...
Major General Joseph Lagu on the right was leader of the إنيانيا during the war. He now stands side by side with General Fatlala, chief of the Sudanese army in the south, a display of reconciliation aimed at soldiers on both sides. With the fighting over, a start can at last be made on the enormous social and economic problems that are South Sudan's legacy from the war. About 1 million peasants fled deep into the bush when the revolt began, and they've been living there in fear ever since. A whole generation has grown up not knowing the meaning of a settled life. Society will have to be rebuilt. People will have to be fed, clothed and sheltered, and given land on which they can settle permanently and put down roots. There are some signs that confidence is returning. These people, for example, are on their way to Juba with a crop of cassava roots. They'll look at city conditions, note market prices, and return to the bush to report their impressions to other peasants. Juba was never a city of riches, even at the best of times. But today, with its population swelled to over 100,000 by people who've sought security from the surrounding countryside, it's become a town of squalor and degradation. In the marketplace, a pathetic display of foodstuffs. Before the war, fresh produce used to come in from the country areas, but the rebel threat isolated the town, and many basic necessities are imported from Khartoum 1,000 miles away. Prices are sky high, even for locally caught fish. Also in Juba is the provisional headquarters of the new High Executive Council for South Sudan. Its president is a famous إنيانيا lawyer, Abel Alia.
We have not provided for about 1 million people. 200,000 to 250,000 are already coming in. We shall expect in 2 months' time about 750,000 from the bush and in the surrounding countries. So we have a problem of food too.
Do you think, is your government organization now equipped to handle this big influx of returnees?
We do not have the resources to do so. The country is a poor country. We have not made adequate preparations for the consequence of the agreement. In fact, the agreement had come, even to people in the country, as a sudden surprise. And a
happy surprise.
And a happy surprise, too. We do not have the potentialities, we do not have the resources, and we have been relying very heavily on help from international organizations and governments.
The scale of Sudan's problems is such that only a huge program of international relief and development assistance is likely to make any impact. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees is planning to bring in emergency supplies to the few available airstrips in the region. But from there on, communication in South Sudan is extremely poor, and distributing aid will be a difficult operation. Since the end of British colonial rule 18 years ago, little has been done to improve the region's rudimentary road system. Indeed, what few roads there are have been severely damaged by military traffic and exploding landmines during the war. In the rainy season, they become impassable swamps. In the dry season, they're hard, rutted tracks that expose even the slightest weakness in a vehicle. The Nile has always been a main artery of communication in Sudan, but in the south it's not as navigable as at Khartoum. In any case, the few boats which reach Juba are old and worn out. North of Juba, the river widens, but navigation is still restricted, this time by the water hyacinths. The story goes that a friendly English lady planted the first hyacinths 100 years ago. They've now grown into enormous weedy beds that completely block the waterway. It seems that initial help for the people of South Sudan will have to come from themselves. Some of them have already made a start, rebuilding shattered homes and reoccupying abandoned villages. But this piecemeal resettlement is unlikely to cater for very many of the hundreds of thousands who'll need proper homes. And it's questionable whether it's even desirable. With so many people to resettle, what's really needed is a master plan to ensure that strong, viable communities are created with all the necessary resources and facilities to sustain their future growth. The government has already set up temporary reception centres for the first wave of returnees. These people are being housed in a school, but they'll have to leave it in a few weeks so that children from existing communities nearby can continue with their education, a situation that shows how the solution of one problem can simply create another. Ideally, the South Sudan government would like to build model villages like this one at Rajaf, south of Juba. Rajaf began as a special project by the UN High Commissioner for Refugees to resettle people who'd fled from the Congo. Now it'll be shared by the Sudanese. Peasants are given a plot of land big enough to grow cash crops as well as their own food, thus bringing them into a market economy and strengthening the economic base of the country. Since the ceasefire, government slogans have appeared throughout the South, exhorting people to greater efforts and extolling the virtues of hard work and self-sacrifice. But it's difficult to make a sacrifice when you've nothing to give, or to be more efficient when you haven't a job. Thousands of Inyinya soldiers are now in this position. Under the terms of the peace agreement, about 6,000 will be recruited into the southern command of the army, and others might join the new regional police force that's to be staffed wholly by southerners. We asked General Lagu whether he thought the rest would be prepared to give up their arms.
Not everybody in the Inyinya would wish to remain a soldier. They took arms because there was a political problem in the country to be solved, which couldn't be solved peacefully before. That was the reason of them taking arms. Now that this problem has been solved, there is no reason why everybody would cling to the rifle.
Right. You think that some of your troops could be used in the very necessary reconstruction in the way of sappers' work, road building, or is that not the intention?
Certainly, certainly. Many of them will be absorbed into these services and they will play a very great part.
Thank you very much.
And even some of them are working now in the roads with our soldiers. They're working together side by side, preparing the roads and doing fine work there.
So all the hard feelings of 17 years of conflict have more or less been
gone.
An optimistic view by General Fatlala, the Southern Army commander. But it'll probably be many more months yet before most of the Inyinya are convinced of the army's friendship. The attitude of the rebel soldiers we spoke to made it clear that 17 years of bitterness and hatred are not going to disappear overnight.
Are there still many freedom fighters in the bush?
Yes, of course.
Most?
Yes.
As people are being transferred one by one.
One by one.
To the regions.
This is one of our bases.
This is why we yesterday been brought here by the convoy of the
army,
of the Sudanese army actually, escorted us from the borders just down here yesterday at nearly at 2:30. Whereas we
Lanya,
next 4:30 we arrive here.
And are they friendly with you?
and how a man may
Yes,
might
of
not,
course.
they are friends, we see them, but we wouldn't believe.
You have to wait and see. Huh?
And see.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Even they themselves, of course, they are still feeling the same tension as we are feeling. But for the time being, it seems that most of us are patient to see what will be the outcome.
They're not friends yet.
Yeah, they are not yet friends.
And the same way you don't trust the Sudanese.
Of course.
And they are not trusting us.
They are not trusting us until we improve bit by bit.
The Addis Ababa Agreement has given Sudan a chance to create a new sense of unity. Today's fragile peace could still be shattered on the rocks of frustration and disappointment, and international aid, generously given and quickly organized, seems the best way of ensuring that these boys now playing as soldiers will never have to take up arms in earnest.
Everyone